Hello, lovely dancers. What we're going to look at today is the Swedish Folk Minuet. Now, this is a lovely dance from the Swedish repertoire. I think it's from Småland, but I could be wrong on that. And it is very much one of my favorite dances in the Swedish repertoire, partly because it has a lovely lilt, and you can either dance it in a very elegant and gracious and dignified way, or you can dance it with more oomph and attitude. It depends on the music and how you interpret the music, the kind of music that you find to dance it to. And another reason why I like it is because I find it very restful. If you've been doing a lot of polskas with really kind of fast whirling around, there's much less whirling in this dance, and so it's a very nice thing to do for a bit of a break. Okay, what kind of music do we need? We need music that is structured in groups of 6 evenly spaced beats that you can count out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The kinds of music that fit that pattern, well, if you happen to find a piece of folk music that's called a minuet, good. Otherwise, slang polska works very well. Polonaises work. And amazingly enough, 3/2 hornpipes. Who would have thought? 3/2 hornpipes work fantastically well for Swedish folk minuets, but only once you've learned the steps, because they go a bit fast. So those are the sort of do it with attitude and oomph kind of pieces of music. And when you get really good at it, you can try and fit it to 3-time bourrée music, but that really goes at a lick for Swedish minuet, but it's good fun. So put that aside for for the end of the session rather than the beginning. So we need pieces of music that you can count in 6s. And that would go something that you can walk to, that you can feel a kind of a walking rhythm to. So we're going to look for something that's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, and let me mention, if you think of going to the classical or Baroque repertoire for minuet music, you might find that it isn't the right tempo. So don't rely on that. And the other thing that we need to look at in the beginning is you look for pieces of music that are structured in sort of groups of 8 bars and 8 bars and 8 bars and 8 bars. Just to begin with, it's easier to hear what's going on and to kind of work out where you are in the dance if you get a piece of music that's structured that way. Because, for example, some polonaises, and for that matter, some slang polskas, have irregular numbers of bars. Once you're confident with the dance, that's fine. But in the beginning, it's easier to work with things that are more regularly structured. So I'm going to find some music, and I'd like to warm up with a bit of that walking around on the beats and then look at another thing that we need to do with that music. So we're going to start with a piece of music that was composed by Steve Turner and is played by Steve Turner and Helena Torpy for us. And I'll count it for you. It has a little introduction. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So just walk around on those groups of 6 beats and count it in your head. Anywhere, doesn't have to be in a circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And try, because you're just moving from foot to foot, try doing little turns. Go in any direction that you like, but evenly spaced. 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we try to find a sense of elasticity in the movement. This vertical component of a gentle bounce, which is called svikt in the Swedish dance terminology. It comes from being soft in the ankles and knees and hips, but keeping the body fairly vertical. So you get this, you never lock, you never straighten your knees rigidly. So you try and keep a sort of an even sense of a flow in your movement. And that soft bounce helps you to negotiate that. Now I'd like you to stay in one place and be aware that you move from foot to foot. I think we need to switch the music off for this and I'll explain what happens next. So we've been walking on every beat. Now I'd like you to consider not walking on some of those beats. So would you like to try standing on one leg and just bouncing with the other foot off the floor? So you need to have a soft and elastic knee, but you also have to have balance on one leg for this job. And try it on the other foot. So what we're going to do now is we are going to do a little bit of practice of moving from foot to foot, but some of the beats we're going to not move, we're going to bounce on the same leg. The easiest way to organize this is to step on 1 and go 2, 3. So I just bounced on that standing leg by flexing the knee slightly. And then on 4, we change feet and we bounce on the other leg. So it's a change, bounce, bounce, change, bounce, bounce. The bounces still exist in all of those steps, but on the 1 and the 4 out of the 6, we actually change weight and stand on the other leg. So now I'm on this axis on my right foot, and I go, that was 1, 2, 3, I just bounce on that right leg. Then I change to my left leg and I go 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we've still got all the 6 bounces, all the 6 fict drops in, but we are changing weight once and doing 2 marking bounces, which do not involve changing weight or stepping onto the other foot. So if I do that in a little circle around and I start with my right leg, I'm going to go right, bounce, bounce, left, bounce, bounce, right, bounce, bounce, left. And as you will see, that will very soon show up for you whether you are well balanced on that standing leg. And that is something that we do need for this dance. We need to be able to step onto a leg. It's a flat step. You're not walking on your toes. Step and then stay there. So this is very good practice for it. So are you ready? I'll do it on my right leg. You do it on your left. Mirror what I'm doing. Step, bounce, bounce, 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 step, bounce. Now carry on doing that. Step, bounce, bounce, step. But try traveling. Obviously you won't travel very far because you're only stepping on 1 out of every 3 beats. But see what happens if you try and move or turn, but you need to stay on one leg. This is a very good balance exercise. Now we're going to change that, and I'm going to do 1 step and 5 bounces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm only stepping on the ones, and on all the rest of them I'm bouncing. Change, bounce, 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 change, bounce, 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 change. So it's even more of a test of your balance because you've got to stay there all that time. Now, try waving that free leg around as you bounce and see how you have to negotiate your balance. 1, bounce, 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 bounce. 1, bounce, 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 bounce. 1, bounce, 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 bounce. 1, bounce, 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 bounce. You can paint pictures with your arms as you do this, it does help. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Okay, that's enough of that exercise, but do feel free to come back to it anytime because it's a good fun one. So far we've practiced this bouncing on one leg, 1 step and 5 bounces making up the 6 beats. We also practiced before that step 2 bounces. Just for interest's sake, I'm going to change that and do 1 step, 1 bounce. Now, for those of you who are interested in the arithmetic of music and dance, if we have 6 beats and we have 2 legs, say I turn my back to you and I show you this. I'm going to start by stepping onto my right foot, and I'm going to go step, bounce, step, bounce, step, bounce. So that's 1 step and 1 bounce. But in order to make up the 6 beats, I'm going to repeat that 3 times. So I'm going to go right, bounce, left, bounce, right, bounce. So when the next group of 6 starts, I'm on the other foot, left, bounce, right, bounce, left, bounce. Now, in terms of what you're doing, you are doing step, bounce, change, bounce. But when you hear how it's fitting with the music, you become aware in the greater structure that in each group of 6, you start first on one leg and then on the other leg. It's just an interesting to observe how the stepping and the music interplay, because it's a 6-beat structure. It's not groups of 2, 4, 8 and so on. It's 2 3s which makes 6, or 3 2s in this case. When we do step, bounce, we are breaking the 6 beats into 3 2s. And it feels slightly odd relative to the music, but just do it for the practice. It's very good. Here we go. 1 2 3 4 5 6. 1 bounce, 1 bounce, 1 bounce, 1 bounce, 1 bounce. Or if you count it in 6s, 1 bounce, 3 bounce, 5 bounce, 1 bounce, 3 bounce, 5 bounce. Okay, relax by just walking around a bit. So I hope you're wondering why I am so interested in these bounces and stepping and bouncing exercises. They very much form part of the way the minuet is danced. We need them. But we need them in a more subtle way than we've practiced so far. So we're looking at a pattern of 6 steps, or 6 beats rather, and we step on more than half of them. But on 2 out of the 6, we don't step, we don't transfer weight. And we don't do that in a regular way, we do it in an asymmetrical way. So I call these a mark, where we mark the beat by doing a swift dip, but we don't actually take a step and change to the other foot. And where they come in those 6 beats is on number 2 and on number 6. So if I show that to you, just facing you, say I step onto my right foot. I go right, that's 1. 2 is a mark. Then 3, 4 and 5 are steps. Transfers 1, 2, 3, or 3, 4, 5, if you're counting from 1 to 6. And 6 is stay on that foot and do a mark. So to say that again more clearly, 1 mark, 3, 4, 5 mark. So there is a swift dip on every beat, but we really make sure it's there in the places where we don't take a step, because if we take a step and then we kind of freeze, it's very difficult to keep that sense of flow going. And also it's very easy, if you're not secure in your balance, to fall off that standing leg onto the other foot. And then we're wrong-footed, because now you've already put your weight on there, but you need to step on it again. So we need to give those non-stepping beats their full value musically by a movement of some kind of hold, but not a freeze. It's got to be that kind of strict pause or mark. Right, here we go. So if I do that, with my back to you, 1 mark, 1, 2, 3 mark. That takes up 6 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or if I don't say the names of the numbers for 2 and 6, but I just go kind of oomph. I go 1, oomph, 3, 4, 5, oomph, 1, oomph, 3, 4, 5, oomph. Now that is the pattern that is used for 3/4 of what we're going to look at in the Swedish Folk Minuet. In various shapes, we use that stepping pattern. So the next thing that we really need to do is to practice that stepping pattern. And you will notice, I'm sure, that it's asymmetrical in that there's 1 step and a mark, and then there's a group of 3 steps and a mark, and then we go back to the 1 step. So depending on how your brain perceives that pattern, you have got 3 steps and you've got 1 step, and then there's a mark in between. So you've got a longer group of steps and a mark, and a shorter group of steps, i.e. just one of them, and a mark, and a longer group and a mark, and a shorter group and a mark. And that is what gives the dance the lilt. The fact that it isn't an evenly spaced repetition of movement. It's got these kind of pauses, these, you know, it's a bit like the mazurka. There's a dynamic pause, a breathing halt in the mazurka, and really it's very like that, but there's 2 places where it happens, on 2 and on 6. So we need to build that in. So I have got some slower music, another slang polska that's played much more slowly, another one by Steve Turner. This one's called Ginny's Tune. And we're going to look at this right mark, 1, 2, 3 mark. It always starts on the right foot. Let's have a look at that. Here we go. 1 mark, 1, 2, 3 mark, 1 mark, 1, 2, 3 mark, right mark, left, right, left mark, 1 mark, 1, 2. One mark, 1, 2, 3 mark, right mark, on the left mark, right mark. So, when you get confident with this, we need to keep that stepping pattern going, but consider moving around in the space and doing that, any direction you like. 1, 2, 3 mark, right mark, 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 1, 2, 3 mark, 1 mark, 1, 2, 3 mark, right mark, 1, 2, 3 mark, 1 mark. And if you get really confident with this, you can try turning around. Just make sure you get the marks in the right places, and if you fall off it, stop and start again. Okay. So, at that slow speed, sometimes it's quite hard not to fall off those marking moments. So that's something really to work on. And that's why we need to keep that sfict going as much of the time as possible, more so at slower speeds, because that movement enables you not to get stuck and not to fall off onto the free leg, which then is no longer free. So we need to use that stepping pattern, and we use that stepping pattern in various shapes in the figures of the dance. So the next thing to do is to look at the figures of the dance.